Good evening, everybody. It's so lovely to see everybody here enjoying our TED Talk. And I feel like everybody is so relieved that we're finally at an in real life conference, and we're all sick and tired of the virtual conference. And so we're here so intimately together to come together and talk about things that we all can agree upon. So before I begin, I would like to first introduce myself. My name is Marie Antoinette, or as my friends call me, Tony. And definitely they don't call me as the queen who lost her head during the French Revolution. That's not me, unfortunately. Not today. Different timeline, maybe. And the question that I'll be delivering today is exams. A measurement of a child's potential? Are exams still a dated measurement of measuring a child's academic, intellectual, and social skills? Now, what I mean essentially with this question is, are exams really all that? And what do they really provide for us students, us children who take them? And so before we dissect and disassemble the education system, let's talk. Let's have a talk on meritocracy. Meritocracy. What is this 11-lettered word? And how is it that our education system in our world is still shackled by it? Well, under textbook definitions, meritocracy is simply just the government or societal system in which where power is held by the people chosen through the merits that they have earned through education, through their experience, learned information, as well as their personal attributes. This system was implemented so that people from the lower and middle class could have a chance at becoming part of the elite, if not be the elite. So, under one of the interviews created at a Vox documentary, the professor of law, Dr. Daniel Markovits, states that meritocracy is based off of competition. It worships superiority over excellence. And the people who have gotten themselves ahead by being good at school, and get this, being good at exams, they have an unlimited appetite in forwarding and educating their children, and they have an incredible capacity to do so because they're part of the elite. They have the resources to do so. And so today's meritocrats spend so much resources that nobody else in society can match. What this all basically means is that the adults who are forwarding our education grew up in the same meritocratic system, and so we too are contributing to it. When we get our exams and we get our marks, the first person we go to are our friends, our teachers, our parents. And as we grow older, the notion that we need to have even more sophisticated merits increases. We join conferences, competitions, debate clubs, MUN. We debate any and all things and take any and all standardized tests, all in the name of appealing to the universities that we want to apply to. My business teacher once told me, and something that I will never forget, is that there is only one proven way that a country can uplift itself, and that's through educating its women. Because when you educate women and they grow up and they have children of their own, they are more inclined in seeing their children receive the same level of education, the same standard, the same quality of education that they've received. Therefore, starting the generational abundance of literacy in that country. The dangers to this in the meritocratic system, as well as the culture of the glorification of standardized testing, is that the elite who had gotten themselves ahead through the same system become the only people who can afford to, quote unquote, ensure their children's academic excellence. And because of this, more and more families are spending more and more resources so that their children can pass these rigorous tests. Tests that I have seen my friends and myself sacrifice our mental health on, especially during the quarantine. So the meritocratic system has now been flawed by the disease and influence of money. where you cannot only get ahead by having a brilliant brain power and a strong will of ambition, you need money as well. And so the elite stays elite, and the middle and lower class struggle to raise themselves on a system that was implemented for them. The journalist of the same documentary states that education is supposed to be an equalizer, and it is built upon the meritocratic belief that effort and ability are the keys to success. But she goes on to ask that, is that really all it takes to be successful in school? And I want to further add on to her question and ask you now, that is success in school, does that translate to success in life? And does it then translate to success of a community and of a society as a whole? Now, I definitely won't be the first person to talk about education, and I certainly won't be the last. Sir Ken Robinson, in his own TED Talk, states that there are 3 principles in which where human life flourishes, and it is contradicted by the culture of education, where teachers have to labor and students have to endure. Okay, and so the first point that he states that we are all naturally different and diverse. However, even though this is a proven fact, we're all different, education under No Child Left Behind is not about diversity, but it's about conformity, where students are encouraged to take tests and schools are encouraged to do what schools are encouraged to do is to find out basically what these kids can do in a very, very narrow spectrum of achievement. Now, I know this, we all know this. In my school, after we've learned a unit in our subject, we have an assessment. We get tested on how much information have we actually digested and learned from what our teacher has taught us. After the test has been marked, it's given out to us, and then we adjust our self-worth and determine our self-esteem on the minuscule percentage that we have received. The school doesn't wait for us, and so the cycle repeats. We move on to the next topic with the next unit, the next subject. And I don't know if anybody else has heard this from their teachers, but I've heard teachers state that, I'm sorry, we just simply cannot wait for you. You're gonna have to catch up on your own because there is simply no time in the syllabus, and we need to prepare you for the dreaded exams that we're going to take in the last 2 years of our schooling. To me, what that basically means is that there isn't time for the people who struggled, and there is no mercy for the mental health that was lost. Sir Ken Robinson and I agree on this, that math and science, they're necessary. I would feel extremely uncomfortable if my doctor didn't know anything about science or math, especially nowadays in the quarantine and the new normal that we're in. But they're not sufficient. A real education needs to give weight, science to math, to the arts, to humanities, and physical education. Education is not linear, and it certainly isn't prohibited by the 4 walls of a classroom. Kids prosper best in a curriculum that celebrates their various talents and not just a small range of them. Now, I believe that my parents are a very good example of this, because my parents have always been the type of people where they supported everything that me and my siblings loved as a kid, whether that was martial arts, training, sports, the arts, singing, dancing, anything that we loved, they were there. And I was fortunate enough to be allowed to explore the things that sparked joy in me as a child. And I do believe that it helped me gain a sense of self-identity and molded me into the person who I am today. What they didn't know then, that I only realized later, was that I was never tested on these things. And I loved it. And the limits to my growing talents in these different areas was unlimited. And there was never a ceiling or a set bar that I had to meet and reach. And I was allowed to grow into whatever, whoever, and however I wanted to express myself as. Sir Ken Robinson further goes on to mention that curiosity is the second fundamental area where human life flourishes, and that curiosity is the engine of achievement. Babies, they like to touch everything, they like to play, they like to put things in their mouth, and they put their five senses into action because they want to feel their environment. They're curious. Our society flourishes because we're so curious about each other's individuality. The unknown makes us so curious that we innovate so that we can provide the answers to the questions that we do not know how to answer yet. Furthermore, he states that teachers are the lifeblood of schools. Surprise! It's not this percentage of students who go to elite universities. It's not the percentage of students who have passed this type of test. It's teachers. Teachers are the lifeblood of schools. She's not here, but my English teacher, Ms. Adila, and my first language class is the only class that I could actively say that I actively look forward to attending every single day. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't like my other subjects. I still love chemistry, I still love math, but in her class, I grow as a person, and my individuality and my self-identity is rejoiced and celebrated. Our exams, although we need to meet a certain criteria, the sky's the limit with creativity. We don't necessarily need to memorize text and actively recall information, but we dissect the humanity of the history that we have gone through. And we are not assessed in our English class on what we were told to study or remember, but to measure our progress and growth in how we communicate with one another and how we express our thoughts and feelings. Her class became a breath of fresh air. And I have come to not dread the exams no longer. And I actually look forward into putting my thoughts onto that paper. Modern education is no longer focused on teaching and learning, but on testing. I cannot recall any other aspects of my other subjects where I am taught not to learn, apply, and be knowledgeable, but be tested. When we were kids, when we were babies, we learned the ABCs. And by the time that we have reached our late teenage years, we've come to resent the words ACTs, SATs, IGCSEs, IB, and any and all tests that fall under those categories. But testing is still important. It is very important in education. There is a place for standardized testing, but it definitely should not be the dominant culture of education. It's there to support learning, to help us and educate us, but it is not there to obstruct us in our education altogether. And instead, in place of curiosity, we have a culture of compliance, where we as students, the next generation, as children, are taught to follow routine algorithms. And even if we're under exams, I still follow an algorithm and I have to meet the certain criteria written on the marking scheme. Even if I memorize the entire book, if I don't say what they say I need to say, I'm wrong. The final aspect in which where human life flourishes is creativity. Creativity. We as humans are naturally creative. But instead of creativity, we have developed a culture of standardization, a mechanical system and not a human system for our organic life. We are not robots. We're human. We change, we adapt. And our creativity is limited in an education system where it is not celebrated, where creativity, intelligence, and curiosity is not explored. Now, basically, I think we all kind of agree the exams are really just not that great. I don't think anyone in this room likes taking exams, let alone marking them if you're a teacher. But to further understand why exams are there in the first place, I would like to bring up the ruler metaphor of Arlo Kemp, where he states that an exam's reliability depends on two things: its job and its flexibility. Say I have a ruler and I want this job to measure the end of this stage to another. It could easily do that. It'll tell me the length of this room, but my ruler won't be able to tell me the temperature outside, and my ruler won't be able to tell me the weight of an elephant, right? And so its usability is hindered. The second way where an exam's usability is determined is through its flexibility. If I wanted to measure the circumference of that balloon or an orange, I could still use a ruler because it'll be in the same unit, but it could lack the flexibility that I need to give me an accurate answer or the answer that I'm looking for. So I wouldn't use my ruler, maybe I'd use a tape measure. And so it is not the exams that's the problem. It's not the exams that could be damaging or misleading itself, but its design. Exams could lack the flexibility in which were more philosophical and more complex questions that don't have a yes or no answer could not be answered because it's up to interpretation. It is also up to the design of the exam to determine what it is trying to measure. And it is our responsibility to only take into account what was assessed and not infer from the results on what this person is. Just like I cannot measure the weight of an elephant with my ruler, we cannot expect that a standardized test could tell us the potential and how smart a person actually is. So to answer my question today, are examinations still a dated form of measurement of a student's potential? Yes and no. Yes, there is a place for education, but as Sir Ken Robinson said, it should not be the dominant culture, and we should not be learning to be tested, but learning to grow, to know, and to acknowledge, and to implement in our daily lives. But no, it is no longer a dated measurement because of said culture, where it is now up to the culture of the flexibility and the job of these exams to determine whether or not it is really accurate. So, furthermore, but there is change. This is all kind of really negative. We all kind of understand that exams really aren't just that great. But there is progress because in quarantine, we saw a quite tremendous shift that I don't think the education community have ever seen. Because we were all stuck inside, education through a screen and virtual education was extremely difficult. And because of this difficulty, standardized tests have adjusted. Some have become temporarily online completely. Some have become easier. SATs became temporarily online. The design change adapting to the life and environment that the students are taking them. But these students gain the merit nonetheless, and it goes into that cycle of where, well, what can the student do with the merit that they have now achieved? There needs to be a change in how we test each other, how the curriculum, how teachers see testing as. And academic excellence is one thing, but social excellence is another. One must have a balance of both analytical and emotional intelligence. But unfortunately, our emotional intelligence isn't always at the top of the priority list. When we're so focused on advancing our analytical intelligence and strengthening our academic progress, we forget that along the way, we're also supposed to be learning on how to connect with one another. And so, thank you.